कहीं पर आसार नदामत जो पढ़े हुए की जबी पर शबीर ने रोमाल कसा और ज़्यादा लिख फातिमा ज़हरा की सना और ज़्यादा मेहदी से मुलाकात हो यूं वक्त की चाकी मेहदी से मुलाकात हो यूं वक्त की चाकी ऐ बीबी जरा तेज चला और ज़्यादा लिख फातिमा ज़हरा की सना और ज़्यादा वो देख दुआ देती है हसनैन की मादर वो देख दुआ देती है हसनैन की मादर मातम में जरा हाथ उठा और ज़्यादा लिख फातिमा ज़हरा की सना और ज़्यादा मातम की इबादत हो या सजदे की इबादत मातम की इबादत हो या सजदे की इबादत दिल दोनों नमाजों में लगा और ज़्यादा लिख फातिमा ज़हरा की सना और ज़्यादा लिख फातिमा ज़हरा की सना और ज़्यादा नारे हैदरी
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ما شاء
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Before he starts, just as a reminder for everybody in the home, inshallah, we're in the children's program for anybody who's under the age of 10. Good?
Yes, under 10.
And above the age of 3.
صلوات
اللهم صل على
اگر میخوای بمونی تو خونه حیدر دلتو بزن به دریا فقط بگو مادر 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 با حرام گونه
ما شاء الله.
Forgive me for my misinformation. Inshallah, we actually have one more news that we'll be reciting. Inshallah, please welcome Brother Bakr with a loud salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
सोने में वो कशिश थी जनाबे अमीर के, तौहीद खुद खरीदने वालों में आ गई। दोज़ख अली के बुग़्ज़ में तक़सीम हो गया, जन्नत अली के चाहने वालों में आ गई। सलवात।
اللهم صل على محمد.
कहती है खल्क़े खुदा तर्ज़ कलाम ऐसा हो, कहती है खल्क़े खुदा तर्ज़ कलाम ऐसा हो, दिल पुकार उठे के उम्मत का इमाम ऐसा हो। एक कतरे का भी एहसान गवारा ना किया, एक कतरे का भी एहसान गवारा ना किया, कुर्बे दरिया किसी लश्कर का क़याम ऐसा हो। बैयत ज़ुल्म से बेहतर है शहादत की तलब, बैयत ज़ुल्म से बेहतर है शहादत की तलब, हक परस्ती का अगर हो तो क़याम ऐसा हो। काश वो मर्तबा पा जाए अक़ीदत मेरी, काश वो मर्तबा पा जाए अक़ीदत मेरी, शाह खुद कह दे कि हाँ मेरा गुलाम ऐसा हो। नारे हैदरी
या हैदर. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
Start the lecture. Please welcome Brother Hussein with a loud salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، شفيع المذنبين، حبيب إله العالمين، خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين، أبي القاسم محمد. قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: وهو أصدق الصادقين، ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أما بعد, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to begin by congratulating everyone on this auspicious occasion, the wiladat of Sayyidatul Nisa, of Hawra al-Insiyya, of Fatima al-Zahra, salamullah alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa I'd like to begin by congratulating the Imam of our time, and also to congratulate the Sadat, specifically the children of Fatima salamullah alayha, as well as the women in our congregation. You know, a lot of the Shia communities commemorate this day as Women's Day, and it's a good excuse to have that kind of an occasion as well. Before we begin, I want to make a few announcements. First, I want to say thank you to all of the people who put the decorations together and these reciters who really brought this spirit for the Wiladat of Al-Zahra to fruition, for their health, their parents, their well-being. Let us recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's also the children's program that they made an announcement for. Just wanted to remind you of that. If you have kids under 10, above 3, there is a program for them in the classes and in the basement over there. And finally, it's a personal request. My grandfather passed away just about 10 days ago. So if I could ask for a Fatiha for his soul with a salawat. When Khadija sallallahu alayha was pregnant with Fatima, she recognized that this is an extraordinary child. It's an extraordinary pregnancy. If you recall, the women of Quraysh had abandoned Rasulullah and they had abandoned Khadija sallallahu alayha under very difficult circumstances. And when she would lament and she would speak to the child in her womb, she noticed that the child responds to her. And she would go to Rasulullah and she would say that this child speaks to me, Ya Rasulullah. Occasion after occasion this happened. Finally, the Messenger of Allah tells Hazrat Khadija sallallahu alayha that I have good news for you. That this child, this daughter of ours, will be the beginning of the line of Imamah. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt will be born from this lady. This will be where my progeny comes from. And we see that 11 Imams of Ahlul Bayt are going to come from this marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima sallallahu alayha, and their pride is going to be that they are descendants of Fatima. When people refer to them, the most honorable reference to them would be to say, O son of the daughter of the Messenger of Allah. Yabna Zahra, Yabna Fatima. This was an honor for the Imams of Ahlul Bayt to be referred to in this manner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us this tawfiq, this opportunity to be here in the Majlis of Hazrat Zahra in the center that is named after her. At the outset, I want to make a dua. Today we see a lot of difficulties amongst the Shia communities in the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help these brothers of ours in these difficult times, in the Muqawama especially, in Yemen and in Lebanon, to give them guidance and to give them victory, inshallah. We also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give the oppressed of the world victory by the zuhur of his hujjah, the return of our Imam and our Sahib, inshaAllah ta'ala. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One of the surahs in the Quran that is about Fatima sallallahu alayha and about the family of Fatima is Surah Insan, also known as Surah Al-Dahr, or Surah Hal Ata. Many of you know the story of this surah. I'll mention it very briefly, but before that there's some recommendations about this surah that are interesting. Reciting the surah on Thursday morning is recommended. And they say whoever does this recitation on Thursday morning and they maintain this habit, they will be resurrected with the Messenger of Allah in the hereafter. So this is no small thing. Also, if you have a lot of stress in your life, a lot of anxiety in your life, if you have drama in your life, this surah is mentioned to be something that is for you, where you can recite it and you can have a more peaceful life. So this is one of the benefits of reciting Surah Al-Dahr. In this surah, specifically in the first 18 ayahs of the surah, we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reference an event that occurred in the house of Fatima and Ali alayhi salam, and then Allah gives us 5 characteristics that Fatima and her family had, and the ulama refer to these as the 5 Fatimi traits. So if you recall, some time ago we mentioned that Imam al-Zaman Jalallah says that Fatima is an example to me, that she is uswatun hasana. So if she is an example, we want to know what is she an example in. What are the things that we want to emulate about Fatima sallallahu alayha? And Allah has recounted this in this surah. There's 5 items that we want to talk about this evening, inshallah. So just to refresh our mind, I'm sure most of you know the event that is mentioned in Surah Al-Atqa, and that is Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salam were sick. They were very ill. Apparently it was a very difficult fever that they were going through. And Rasulullah comes to visit them. And when he's visiting, he recommends to Amir al-Mu'mineen and to Fatima sallallahu alayha to make a nadr, make an oath to fast for 3 days if Hassan and Hussein are healed, if they recover from the sickness. Right, so the first lesson we have here is that it is a recommendation from Rasulullah himself that nadr is a good tool, that I make an oath. If I'm going through some kind of difficulty, or if I have a particular haja from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I say, Ya Allah, if I can overcome this difficulty with your aid, if you help me push through this, I will obligate myself to perhaps recite this much of the Quran, or to perform this many salat, or to fast like in this case, or any number of these things that are going to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see this amongst the ulama. It's very common. Right? They're always keeping some form of a naz, some form of an oath. Marhum Faiz al-Islam, for example, rahmatullah alayh, just as a quick example, when you read the introduction of his book Khatun al-Sara, it's a book about Zainab al-Kubra sallallahu alayha, like many scholars in their introduction, he says that I was very sick and I made an oath to Allah that if He cured me, I would write a book about Zainab al-Kubra sallallahu alayha. And so when I was cured, I obligated myself to perform this oath now. Right, so the nazr, it's important that you fulfill the nazr. So Rasulullah recommended that they fast for 3 days. And just, I might mention also that nazr shouldn't be something silly. Right? Sometimes people talk about making a nazr as if it's a dare. Right? I'm going to make an oath to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if He cures me or if He gives me this job, I'm going to wear yellow for 2 weeks. That's not a valid kind of nazr. Right? This isn't a dare. It's not just difficulty for the sake of difficulty. Or I've heard of small villages in Iran where people, when their kids got sick, they would make a nazr that if the kid is healed, I'm going to grow my son's hair for 7 years without shaving it ever. Right? So this is not a nazr that is going to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grow the kid's hair for 7 years. Right? It should be something like fasting or saying zikr or Quran. And we shouldn't fall off the other side of this equation either, where sometimes people don't do the practical, material things that they know how to do, and they make a nazr instead. Right? Nazr is not a substitute for, going to the doctor, for example. We have narration from Imam Baqir alayhi afsal salatu wassalam. When he was ill, he was doing all of the things you would expect someone to do, taking the medicines and attending to himself to get better. And at the same time, he would say, Ya Mawlati, Ya Fatima aghithini. He's doing his tawassul to his mother Fatima, but he's also taking care of his health. Right? So this is the equation that we have. Rasulullah says to bind your camel and then do tawakkul as well. People at nighttime, they would leave their camel in the desert, and in the morning they were upset that the camel had run off somewhere. Rasulullah says, why didn't you bind it? Tie it down. Tie it down and also do tawakkul. Right? So this is the equation. So when we do nadr, also we are still thinking about the practical ways of solving our issue or reaching our hajj. So Rasulullah recommended that they fast if Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam were cured. And when they were cured, they began this 3 days of fasting. And you know the story. The first day, there comes a miskeen knocking at the door right before iftar time, and they only had bread, and this bread was very difficult to come by. This is something that sometimes we miss. If we want bread, we go to the grocery store and we grab a loaf of bread and then we go home. At this time, Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam is digging wells. And with this money, he is going to go and buy a bushel of wheat. And he's going to take this bushel of wheat home to Fatima sallallahu alayha. She has to clean this bushel. And then she has to turn it into powder and grind it down. And then to turn that into dough and then turn that into bread. It's a very significant part of the day. And then at the end of that day, someone knocks on the door and they say, I'm hungry. And so they give this bread away without any hesitation. As someone who is miskeen. On the second night, there is a yatim that comes again. And by the way, the previous night, they did their iftar with water. There's nothing else. That bread was what they were looking forward to. When they gave it away, they did iftar with water. And then the second night again, they give it away to the yatim. And on the third night, they give it away to the asir. One of the items that the Mufassirin point out about the asir is that this person, this captive, is not a Muslim individual. This is a non-Muslim that is coming to the door of Ahlul Bayt, knocking, asking for food, and they give all of the food that they have to this individual. When it comes to difficulties like hunger, we're not looking at the person's religion, we're not looking at whether they have other difficulties or they're alcoholics or drug addicts. The person is hungry, right? You give them that food in that way. And in this instance, this is an infaq that they did. They gave from that which was all that they had in those circumstances, right? 3 days they are fasting and they're giving away what they had. So that's the general story that is recounted in the narrations. In Surah Al-Ata, Allah reminds us of this event, and He gives us 5 characteristics that we should try to implement ourselves. If we take Fatima sallallahu alayha as our role model, these are the 5 traits that the Quran, this is not hadith that we're talking about, this is the Quran itself. 5 traits from the Quran that we should implement, that we'll mention with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The first quality that the Quran mentions is yufuna bin nadhr. To oblige myself to fulfill my promise. The Ahlul Bayt made a promise to Allah. They made an oath. If Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein are cured, we're going to fast. So they made this nadhr, and then they did the wafa bil ahd. They fulfilled the nadhr. Don't make a promise if you're not going to keep it. We cannot overemphasize. Make sure that, guys, the importance of your word carries weight with you at least. If you tell someone, I'm going to meet you at this time, at this place, and then an excuse comes up, make sure that at least you remind yourself, my word is over there. This excuse is too small compared to my word. My word is to meet this person at this time and this place. This is the tradition of Ahlul Bayt. Don't underestimate your word. Don't let your word become devalued. When you go and you want to propose for marriage and you tell people, I'm going to be a good spouse, I'm going to take good care of you. And then later on in life you're in an argument, remind yourself, I made a promise. I made an oath that I was going to be a good spouse. Yes, maybe it's their fault right now. Maybe the argument is the other person's fault. But my word carries so much value. And in this instance, I'm going to make sure that I observe the promise that I made. Keep that promise. Yufuna bil nadhr, yufuna bil ahd. This is one of the qualities that Allah is saying that these people are an example of that. Number 2, وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا. That they were abuse. Have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have fear of the Day of Judgment. We mentioned during the Ayyam Fatimiyya that when Rasulullah had a verse of wrath revealed to him, and he spoke of this to Fatima sallallahu alayha, she faints, she passes out when she hears about the wrath of Allah that has been revealed to Rasulullah in the Quran. Right? These are people, ashaddu khawfan. They are severe in the way that they fear Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this is a second item that Allah wants us to implement about this event that occurred. Number 3, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. They gave this food that they wanted for themselves. عَلَى حُبِّهِ. When we talk about, this event that they fasted for 3 days and then they gave their food away, and we're saying, why is this so important that Allah is going to mention it in the Quran? It's because of the intentions that Allah sees behind this. They didn't do this for the sake of, reputation or anything like that. Allah sees the entire dynamic, and He sees that they gave from that thing that they wanted for themselves. Ala hubbi. We know the difference between sadaqah and infaq. Sadaqah is when I have an excess and I want to donate it. I want to donate it to the homeless program. I want to donate it to the masjid. I want to donate it to an individual. That's sadaqah, that I give out of the excess that I have. But infaq is when I wanted it for myself. I had plans for this. All day Fatima sallallahu alayha is making this bread. It's the only thing that they have. They're about to break their fast, and they give it away. They give that thing which they desired for themselves. You might have seen these clothes drops. There's one of them close to my home where it's a small box in a parking lot and people put their clothes, extra clothes in there. And when you pass by it, there's a barbecue grill and there's a hockey stick, and everybody's putting all sorts of items that they don't want anymore. And they have to bring waste management to throw all of this stuff away. This is things that I don't need, I don't want, I just want to get rid of it. And I donate it to make myself feel good. There's a big difference between that and giving from that which you want for yourself. I see that Ahlul Bayt, and you see that the examples are abundant. One is Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam Sajjad. He is eating food, or he's about to eat food rather, and a poor person comes and asks him for help and says, I'm hungry. Imam Zayn al-Abidin has these helpers with him. He had servants, he had helpers. And these people say, Yabna Rasulullah, we'll go and make him a plate of food. You don't worry about it, you eat your food, we'll make him a plate of food and we'll give it to this poor person. Imam Sajjad takes his plate and he gives it to the poor person, and when the servants bring food, Imam eats from that. And when these servants and these helpers, they ask Imam Zayn al-Abidin, they say, why did you do that? We said, we're going to bring him food. He says, yes, but this food, I had put my eye on it. I wanted it for myself. I was about to consume this, it had become mine. Because it was mine, because I had thought about it, it had the status, ala hubbihi. I wanted to give that one away. And then the other one that you made for him, that one can be mine. Look at the delicate behavior of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. And he would recite this ayah, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا يُحِبُّونَ. You will not grow your capacity, that goodness inside of you, unless you give from that which you love for yourself. That thing that you want for yourself. If you give that away, then you will experience that growth. So Imam Sajjad would recite this ayah when people would ask him why you gave away the thing that was yours instead of the thing that you could have given to them in another way. Ala Muhammad wa alayhi salawat. The fourth item that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Ata and Surah Insan is the one criteria that has to be there for anything else to even matter. If this item is not there, it doesn't matter how much kindness you do toward others. It doesn't matter how much salat you perform. It doesn't matter even if you build a masjid. That masjid, we'll mention the ayahs in the Quran, should be torn down. And that item is ikhlas. It's that sincerity that the Ahlul Bayt had. Because it had all of these elements. It wasn't just that they fasted and then they gave away their food, but that they fasted and they gave away the very last bit that they had. It was everything that they had. That they fasted and they gave away for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for some other reason. Yes, they might have had pity for these people, they might feel sorry for these people, but that's not the only reason they gave it away. They gave it away because they're thinking about Yawm al-Qiyamah, because they know that this is something that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the criteria that must obtain. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. They gave for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might have heard the story of Masjid Zirar. This is a masjid that a group of people built, but they did not have the purest of intentions when they were building it. Unlike Masjid Quba was already built. It was a small masjid. In fact, it was so small, they say maybe 10, 15 people could fit in it and do salat at the same time. That's how small Masjid Quba was. Right? We would call it a room. It's just like a small square area where people would come, 10 people, 15 people maximum. These people said, we're going to make something much bigger, much nicer. And they didn't want to have a nightclub there, right? There's still going to be a place of salat and Quran and talking about Islam. But their intentions were diluted. Their intention was to put down Masjid Quba. Rasulullah commands the destruction of this masjid. And he gives it 3 names. One is Masjid Zirar. This masjid is going to cause harm. Another is Masjid Kufr. And another is the Masjid of division. The masjid is going to break up the community. This is a masjid. But the intention, that the foundation of building that masjid are the wrong intentions. It doesn't matter how pretty you make it and how much you spend on it. The people who are building the masjid have to meet certain criteria. And the people who are building the masjid, who are gathering the funds for it, they have to have the right intentions when they are doing this. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. What they did was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you look at the tafsir of Wajhullah in Tafsir Namuna wa Qarati, for example, he says Wajhullah is that thing that is done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything other than that will eventually vanish. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Everything in this creation will vanish, will disappear, except for that thing that was done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This gathering is going to end. All of the gatherings that are held in this Lady Fatima Center one day will completely end. All of us will come to an end. In fact, our lives are so short that this Colorado Boulevard that is adjacent to us will outlast all of us, in all likelihood. Colorado Boulevard will be there, and another group of people will be doing something in this location. The thing that remains is Wajhullah. The thing that you did for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only thing that remains. So when you know that everything is going to pass, that everything is so transient, I'm more transient than Colorado Boulevard. This is why I have incentive to send things forth that can be collected and be there for me in perpetuity And the way that I do that, the promise that Allah has made me, is that if you do it for me, if you do it for Allah, I will preserve that action for you. And that will be there on the other side in the hereafter. And finally, the last item that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about this event that we ought to implement in our lives is إِنَّا نَخَافُ مِنْ رَبِّنَا يَوْمًا عَبُوسًا قَمْطَرِيرًا, is to have that taqwa, that fear of Allah. People say, sometimes we have difficulty with this idea of fearing Allah. Is Allah supposed to be feared? And the response that the ulama give to help people to understand is that this fear means to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To always know that Allah is observing me in this action that I am involved in right now. Abdullah ibn Umar was with a group of his friends. I'll mention this story and inshallah we will conclude. They're in the desert and they're traveling. And they see a large herd of sheep. And they approach the herd, and they see the shepherd, and they say, we're traveling, we're in the middle of the desert. Can we purchase one of these sheep from you? Right? These guys wanted to have a really good day. Right? You're sitting in the desert under the stars, you have this sheep, you make nice kebab with it, and you have a good time with your friends. The shepherd, unfortunately, he says, these sheep aren't mine, I apologize. I'm only the shepherd, but I work for a rancher. These are all his. I don't have permission to buy and sell his sheep. Abdullah ibn Umar asked the shepherd, he says, how many sheep do you have? But there were so many. All you can see with your eyes are sheep everywhere. And the man gives him a range, a number. He says, somewhere between this number and this number is the number of sheep that I have. And he says, Abdullah ibn Umar says, does the owner of the sheep know the exact number of the sheep? He said, no, the owner also knows that there's a range of how many sheep he owns. He doesn't know the exact number. So he says, okay, then what's the harm? You don't know the number. He doesn't know the number. I'm willing to pay for it so that I can split this up with my friends and we have a nice night under the stars. I want to buy this sheep from you. No one's going to be upset. And it says the shepherd man, this is the wisdom, that you don't need to have, 2 PhDs and whatever degree to have this kind of wisdom and understanding of Allah. The shepherd, he points to the sky, he says, what do I do about him? Yes, you're right. Everything you said is accurate. I don't mind it. The owner's never going to know. You're willing to pay for it. Everything could be fine, but what do I do about him? What do I do about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is that nakhafu rabbuna. To be afraid of Allah, this is the meaning of being afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us who have come here in the Majlis of Fatima Zahra Salaam alayha, in a center that is named after her, to help us to inculcate these characteristics, these qualities. We don't want to be people who just mention the names of Ahlul Bayt, but our lifestyles do not match the Ahlul Bayt. So many of our problems could be resolved if we had the lifestyle of Ahlul Bayt. Ya Fatima Zahra, Ya Binta Muhammad, Ya Ghurrata عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم يا الله. اللهم اغفر لوالدينا ولوالدي والدينا وارحم موتانا واغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا وانصر إخواننا المسلمين واحفظ قائدنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب الزمان.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I have two things to go over. One is on a more serious note. We'll take a few minutes to talk about membership for Lady Fatima Center. And then the second item, which is on a more hopefully fun and engaging note, is we have a Kahoot game prepared regarding the life of Hazrat Zahra Salamullah Alaiha. And after that, inshallah, we will conclude the program. If I can get another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we'll start with the more serious topic and then we'll pivot over to the more engaging piece, inshallah. So just wanted to take a few moments of your time and speak about membership. As I'm sure most of us are aware, Lady Fatima Center is a membership-based nonprofit organization under Section 51C3 of the Internal Revenue Code, and is governed by a constitution. So the members of Lady Fatima Center, they make up the general body of the organization. And as a member, you're responsible for the financial upkeep of the masjid, deciding on major affairs pertaining to the masjid, as well as electing the executive committee, which manages the affairs of the masjid. The executive committee consists of a programming coordinator, logistics coordinator, finance coordinator, youth coordinator, and the children's program coordinator. You can see the names there on the screen. And these are the individuals that manage the affairs of the masjid. And as well, we have a board of trustees, which are the founding members of the organization. And they're responsible for ensuring that Islamic laws are upheld in the execution of any LFC programs. So just to sort of put things in perspective here, this is a very rough breakdown of our current monthly expenses versus our income. And so you can see that between mortgage, utilities, and then basic services, it costs about $6,000 a month to keep the lights on. So we're not talking about food and the dinner sponsorships, we're not talking about all the speakers that we invite, we're not talking about the workshops. We're just saying basic minimum needed to keep, oh, this projector is not on. That's not good. Sorry. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Can you guys kind of see from this side? No, I apologize. Okay, we'll share the slides afterward as well, and I'll try my best to summarize. So our expenses, just to keep the center open, right? Again, we're not talking about dinner sponsorships, we're not talking about when we invite speakers, just the bare minimum to keep the lights on. It's roughly around $6,000 a month. And then when you look at the income, right? With membership, we have about 4,800-ish coming in, and then we have about the rest that comes in through donations or other miscellaneous things, like we perform a nikah for somebody and they donate, or we do a funeral and they'll donate. And so we're essentially breaking even at this point, right? And there might be some months where things can actually become a little tenuous. And so this is where we just wanted to encourage all of our brothers and sisters in the community, if you're not already a member of Lady Fatima Center, to step up and sign up for membership. As I mentioned, this is a membership-based organization. It is through your contributions that we're able to keep this place operating and running and providing these events and functions. Just a couple of reminders. I'm sure a lot of this is obvious to everybody, but you know, why should I become a member of Lady Fatima Center? So if you look at the previous slide, yes, we are breaking even in terms of our income versus expenses, but a big portion of that income is coming in through donations. So we might have a lucky month in Rajab and Shaban. There's a lot of nikahs that are performed, and then a lot of funds might come in. Or we might have a difficult month where there's more than one funeral that happens and those donations come in, but it's not a reliable and steady source of income, right? The membership, the monthly income is what we need in terms of having a steady source of income. The other obvious important benefit there is that as we talk about the long-term growth of our community, we've talked about the 5-year plan, we've talked about buying land and building a masjid, we've talked about bringing in a resident alim, we presented that 5-year plan in Muharram this year and the Muharram past year. All of that is contingent on us getting to at least 100 members. Because if we don't have 100 members, if we don't have a steady $10,000 a month coming in, we will not be able to advance and grow to that next level. So that's obviously the more of a tangible reason why we need to ensure that we have that income stream. Obviously, as a member, you're able to share your knowledge, your experience, and feedback for the well-being of our masjid in the long run. You can vote for the representatives on the executive committee. You can be part of the executive committee and be involved in the day-to-day management of the masjid. And besides all of these sort of tactical and practical considerations, I think the most important piece that we should keep in mind, that at least for me personally resonates the most, is where Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, he says to his companion Fudayl, O Fudayl, tujallisun wa tuhaddithun. O Fudayl, do you get together among each other and you mention and propagate our teachings? And Fudayl says, yes, we do this. Fudayl was not from Medina, he was from somewhere else. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says that I love these gatherings. And Imam Sadiq says to Fudayl that, O Fudayl, fahyu amrana. O Fudayl, keep alive our affair, keep alive our cause. And I love those who keep alive our cause. So besides all the practical considerations, becoming a member, being a part of the organization is an opportunity for all of us to stand before Hazrat Zahra Salamullah alayha on the Day of Judgment and say that I also played a small part and a small contribution in ensuring that the cause of your family and the cause of your children was kept alive. I had a small part to play in ensuring that a facility was available where Dua Kumail was recited every Thursday night, where Friday prayer was performed, where we gathered to celebrate the happy occasions associated with your family, where we gathered to mourn upon you and your children, where we did Laylatul Qadr, where we did Eid prayers, where we did all of these community gatherings where brothers and sisters were able to come together. So on a more direct level, the main incentive, the main reason why it is important to become a member is that at the end of the day, this is the work of Hazrat Zahra Salamullah alayha. She will take care of it regardless, whether I become a member or not. So really the incentive is there for me to step up and be part of that movement, to be part of that cause, so that I can face her with pride on the Day of Judgment and say that I played a very small part in ensuring that in this Diyar Kufr, in this land of disbelief, in a city where there happens to be a masjid named after your opponents, I happen to be contributing to making sure that there is a masjid that was here in your name. I'm sure we're all aware there's a masjid in Abu Bakr in Colorado, there's a masjid in Umar in Colorado. all of us should ideologically feel very insistent that we make sure that there's also a Lady Fatima Center in this state. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli. So as far as the membership fee structure, the way that it's set up in our constitution is that as an individual member, it's $100 a month. If the husband and wife would both like to be members, then there's a discount for the spouse, so then it's $150 for individual plus spouse. We also want to encourage our younger brothers and sisters to be members of the organization, because you start now, and inshallah, as you go through your college careers and your adult life, that you establish this practice from now of supporting the masjid. So there's also a student membership that's $50, and again, student plus spouse is $100 as well. Sometimes we get feedback, and last thing I'll say, and then we'll go over, hopefully you'll get the projector to work, and then we'll go over to the Kahoot. Sometimes we get feedback that in other communities the membership due is a lot less. It's $100 a month is very high compared to some other organizations and masjids. And I'll say two things regarding that. Number one, like I said, when we look at our income versus expenses, this is barely what's needed to kind of keep us afloat, right? So Colorado is an expensive state. You can go to Dearborn, you can go to Houston and buy a real estate for a lot cheaper than what it costs to buy this masjid over here. So that's just part of the reality of where we have. But on a deeper level, I think many of us come from various different economic backgrounds, different income levels. But I think I can safely say that overwhelming majority of our community, there's rarely any families where the combined household income is not at least $50,000. And if it's at least $50,000 per year, then this is 2% of your income. I want us to, when we talk about other religious communities and we say, oh, why are the Jews doing all of this? Why are look at their churches, look at what they have. The Christians, maybe not all of them, but the ones who are practicing, I personally know many coworkers, and you probably know them as well. They have a tithe system where they pay 10% of their income to the church. And I personally have many coworkers who have their direct deposit at work set up where 10% goes directly to the account of the church. It doesn't even come into their hands. It doesn't come into their bank account because they say, this is the money of Jesus. This is the money of God. I don't even want to touch it. It needs to go straight to the church. So when we compare ourselves to other religious groups within the country, within our society, and we wonder why they are ahead, or why they have better facilities, or why they have these huge buildings and gyms and rec centers and all of this available, there are people who are committing 10% of their income to their religious organizations. There are people who are putting their churches and their synagogues as their life insurance beneficiaries. There are people who are putting their religious organizations in part of their will when they pass away. So the least that we can do if we want to advance our organization, if we want to take the next step, if we want to, inshallah, move forward to that 5-year plan that we discussed, as far as having a resident alim, as far as buying land, building a masjid, is we make this intention tonight to Hazrat Zahra Salamullah Alayha, that $100 a month, $150 a month, I will commit to this, and I will do this in the name of Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alayha and the children of Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alayha. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli. So we have these QR codes. We'll leave these up after the Kahoot, and Brother Yasser will be setting up a desk in the lobby area where you can sign up for membership and for the auto pay option. The one on the left is for membership, and the one on the right is the auto pay. So inshallah, we'll conclude with that point, and then on to our more fun plan for tonight, which is the Kahoot. Inshallah, with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we'll get the projector going. Oh, it's working. Okay.